Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a little bit of an annual roundup of 15 books that I read this year that have had some sort of impact on me. We're going to go over 10 books that had an impact on my personal life in terms of dating, relationships, mindset, productivity, and general good vibes about living a happy, healthy life. And 5 books that had a big impact on the business as a whole. Let's get into it. The first one is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Now this is subtitled Time and How to Use It. And it's sort of like a productivity book about like time management, but it's not really. It's like a philosophical approach to time management. And really his whole vibe is that life is finite. We're all going to die someday. And therefore the way that we choose to manage our time and be intentional with the small time we have on this earth is like really important. But also he like rails against the classic productivity guru stuff about like, you can do everything if you manage your to-do list properly. His vibe is more like, look, let's just accept that we're never going to actually make the time for all the things that we actually want to do. And let's be okay with that. And let's keep that in mind as we figure out what to do with our time. So it's really good. It was very heartwarming. I listened to it on Audible. I'm actually interviewing him on my Deep Dive podcast. Link below if you haven't subscribed to the Deep Dive podcast. But the thing I took away from this was really just being a little kinder to myself when it came to things like productivity and time management. And if I don't get all the things I wanted to do done in a given day, if I end up not responding to people on email or WhatsApp and stuff, it's like, that's okay. You know, in a dream world, I would be on top of absolutely everything and I'd be crushing it across all fronts and reply to everyone within 3 seconds of them sending me a message. But in the real world, that's not gonna happen. And it's just cool to be okay with that. So I thought this was a very nice, fresh take on the whole productivity thing that I really enjoyed. All right, next on the list, we have Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn. Now, Alfie Kohn is a child psychologist. Also, it might be weird that I'm reading a book about parenting, but genuinely, I think this book is really interesting if you're a parent, but also if you're not a parent, because if you've ever been a kid and ever had parents who parented you in a particular way or another, it'll be interesting to hear what the evidence is around some of these practices. And basically the whole vibe of unconditional parenting is that there is a type of parenting, conditional parenting, kind of, which is where a child feels as if they are loved for the things that they do rather than for who they are. And so things like praise, apparently praise is problematic. And one of the things that Alfie talks about is how when we praise children like, oh, well done, Johnny, you did really well in that maths test, Johnny starts to associate his own self-worth with him doing well in the maths test. Well done, Johnny, you played with someone else and you shared. And they start to associate like, yeah, they start to stop feeling as if they're loved for who they are, but instead feel as if they're loved for what they do. And that's like super interesting. So like praise is bad. Apparently punishment is bad. Apparently rewards are bad as well. And it was just like a really engaging read. I listened to it on Audible, like with most of these books. And he kind of talks about loving children without strings attached and talks about how it's kind of weird the way that we treat children as being kind of an extension of their parents, not really having any autonomy, not really having any rights. And so the book hasn't really changed anything about the way I'm approaching my life right now, although it will be interesting when I hopefully come to being a parent at some point. But it has been very interesting in giving me another perspective on kind of the challenges of being a parent and how much of a sort of psychological minefield it can be. Really good book. I've been recommending it to everyone, and everyone I've recommended it to who's read it has said, oh, this is actually really good. So yeah, check it out. All right, the next is a book that I reread this year called Models by Mark Manson. Now, Mark Manson is a famous author at this point, famous for The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F***, and another New York Times bestseller, and he's like this very mainstream author who actually co-wrote Will Smith's autobiography, which is kind of interesting. But not many people know that in a previous life, Mark Manson was like a dating coach for men. And this book came out, I think around 2011. It's basically all about how you attract women, but do it through honesty. So like before this book came out, the whole pickup artist movement, the books around that thing, also I've heard, was all about kind of techniques and strategies and hacks and tricks to kind of trick women into sleeping with you and all that kind of stuff. Then Mark Manson comes along, and basically his whole spiel is that, look, if you want to attract the woman of your dreams, or if you want to get a decent like life partner, you should become the sort of person who a good person would be attracted to. And so you should work on yourself and become more authentic and become like open, you know, show your vulnerability and maybe like go to the gym a bit and like dress a bit better and like, you know, be authentic in conversation and be more vulnerable and open up a bit more. And I recently reread this because I first read this many years ago. It's just really good. It's not like what you would think. It's very like mainstream acceptable. He talks about female and LGBT readers as well at the start. And yeah, it's just actually sick. And I think in the past, I've definitely been guilty of feeling like I had to kind of change myself to, well, when I was on dates and in relationships and stuff, to become more like, I don't know, some caricature of what I thought like an alpha male looked like and stuff. But recently I've realized I've come around to the idea that actually just being yourself and being your authentic self and being open and vulnerable and honest and stuff is by far a better approach. So thank you, Models by Mark Manson, for being a guide into those waters in like an interesting way. So yeah, if you are a dude looking to find a life partner, would recommend models. If you're not a dude looking for a life partner, it's still kind of interesting, but it's kind of more applied to dudes looking for life partners. So yeah, check it out. All right, next we have the book Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss, who was apparently an FBI hostage negotiator for like 15 years before he wrote this book. This is sick. So most of these nonfiction books, they are like big idea books where they have one central big idea and then the rest of the book just sort of justifies that idea. This is not one of those books. It does have a central thesis, and that central thesis is that when we're negotiating, and actually he talks about how it's not just about negotiating hostages, but like lots of different conversations in life are negotiations. Like when you negotiate with, someone to buy a car, when you negotiate with a spouse, when you negotiate with your kids to get them into bed on time. These are all negotiations. And in fact, the best way to negotiate is recognizing that the decisions people make are emotional rather than logical. And so you want to appeal to the emotional side of their brains and to their hearts. And rather than there being just one big idea that he explains a bunch of times, there's 9 different chapters, and each of them has 9 fairly counterintuitive, interesting methods or techniques or tricks or principles you can apply when negotiating with people to more likely get what you want. And there's a bunch of really interesting tactics like mirroring and calculated empathy, and why actually instead of about trying to get to yes, like make them say yes multiple times, you actually want to make them say no because it makes people feel more comfortable. This is a book that I've listened to twice already on Audible, and every time I do, I get more and more insights from it. So this is definitely one that I'm going to reread. But yeah, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depending on it. Next, we have the book Die with Zero, Getting All You Can from Your Money and Your Life by Bill Perkins. This is also really good. This has kind of changed the way that I approach thinking about money. And the central idea of the book is that we want to aim to die with 0 in our bank accounts. And if we die with anything more than 0 in our bank accounts, then we have done something wrong. Its core model is that, like, in an ideal world, we have this life energy, the energy that we have in our life, and we would ideally like to trade that life energy for fulfilling and meaningful experiences with our friends and family. But we can't do this direct one-for-one trade because mostly fulfilling experiences do cost some amount of money. Maybe they don't have to cost the world, but they do cost some amount of money. And so we often have to do this intermediate step. Like, we have life energy, we convert it into money by working a job, and then we convert that money into life experiences. And his point isn't that we should just convert all of our money into life experiences because that's the only thing that matters. But his point is that most of us, especially if we're successful in whatever way you want to define that, get to a point where we are so focused on saving and accumulating wealth that we failed to realize that actually money has literally 0 benefit when you are dead. And this is a thing that people on their deathbed realize, that, you could have 10 million quid at that point, like 100 million or a billion. Like, it wouldn't make any difference to your life because you can no longer enjoy that money. And so, what if you waited until 70 to start spending money? Probably not ideal. What about 60? What about 50? What about 40? And his kind of point in the book is that we shouldn't just like make loads of money and wait until we're retired when our bodies are kind of breaking down to then spend the money and enjoy it. We should try and enjoy life as we're going through it. And I really liked how the message of the book is this idea of journey before destination, that yes, there is value in saving for a rainy day and all that stuff and putting stuff in investments and working hard right now so you can enjoy the rewards later, but it's also a balance between making sure we're also enjoying ourselves in the here and now. Because what we don't want to do is get to our deathbeds and think, oh damn, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Maybe I could have quit my job 10 years earlier because I actually had enough money in the bank, or 5 years earlier because I actually had enough money to do well, and I actually could have taken that trip that I really wanted to take. I've mentioned this to a few friends, this thing of die with 0. 2 things always. What about the kids? Be like, well, if you die with 0, then you're not going to leave any money to your kids. He answers this. There's a whole chapter called What About the Kids? Basically, his vibe is that if you actually want to give money to your kids as a form of inheritance, don't give it when you are dead. Because when you're dead, your kids are probably in their 50s or 60s, and they can't actually use the money as well as they could when they were in their 20s or 30s. And it's weird because, like, in America, the average age of inheritance is like 60 something. It's just this weird societal thing that we do where it's like, oh, when I'm dead, then I will give my money to my kids. He's like, no, you should please give the money when they're young and they can actually use it for a deposit on a house or their first car or anything like that. Similarly with charity. Charities need money right now. They will also probably need money 50 years from now, but if you have money to give charities right now, you should give it because plenty of people are dying in the world who could benefit from that money. Don't wait until your deathbed to suddenly decide you're going to donate to charity. That is not a virtuous thing to do, given that your charities need the money now. And so once you've given to charity, once you've given to your kids while you're alive, the point is you should end up with 0 in your bank account by the time that you die. And I think it's just really interesting. It's kind of, I think I'm very much a save for a rainy day type person, and I don't like to spend money, although it doesn't look like it. Maybe looking around the camera stuff around here. I don't really like to spend money. I always feel like I should be saving for a rainy day, and I often have this kind of fear that I'm going to end up broke and homeless and stuff. And to be honest, now that this YouTube channel is and this business is going well, I'm way beyond that point of having enough. And so what I learned from the book is that I should be more okay with enjoying life, not feeling like I have to work at 120 miles per hour every single day to make even more money, but actually that I can take the time to enjoy life with friends and family and things like that. So really enjoyed the book. Fantastic message. Next, we have this book, Happy Sexy Millionaire by Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett is a chap. He's a fantastic chap. He interviewed me on his podcast. Really friendly guy. He's ridiculously successful. Sold his company for like 300 million or something. Became the youngest dragon in the UK's Dragon's Den, which is like the UK version of Shark Tank. Apparently, that's the thing. But the book is really good. I'll read out an excerpt from the back. As an 18-year-old black, broke, lonely, insecure university dropout from a bankrupt family, I wrote in my diary that I wanted to be a happy, sexy millionaire by the age of 25. By 25, I was a multimillionaire, having created a business worth over $300 million. Ironically, in achieving everything I set out to, I learned that I was wrong about almost everything. The world had lied to me. It lied to me about how you attain fulfillment, love, and success, why those things matter, and what those words actually mean. Genuinely, like, really good book. A bunch of interesting chat. It's also like really nicely designed. Like there's a bunch of these like bits where there's like quotes and diagrams and stuff. We talk about social media, we talk about figuring out what you want from life, finding your values. You are not what happened to you, you are how you chose to handle it. And there's a really good metaphor. Never trade your happiness for a career, money, external validation, popularity, or status. The ultimate goal is happiness. Your wealth, success, fame, and accomplishments will only be worthwhile if they serve that goal. Yeah, fantastic message all around. And there's a really good model towards the end of the book where he talks about thinking about time in terms of chips. Like we have 112 hours each week of waking time, and we have 112 chips every week that we can choose to deploy. And every hour we have to choose what we do with a chip of time, kind of like being at the poker table or whatever. You have to play a chip every hour, although that's not how it works. Yeah, just thinking about time in that very concrete way has helped me be a little bit more intentional with how I'm spending my time. But yeah, fantastic book overall. Love it. I'm going to definitely reread this. Really good stuff. Well done, Stephen. Next, we have a book by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds. And this is like David Goggins' sort of memoir. He's like a Navy SEAL guy who's famous for like doing ridiculous like Iron Man, Ultraman, those sorts of athletic things. But he talks about kind of how like his childhood of like poverty and physical abuse and racism in America and a bunch of other really messed up stuff. And it's such a inspiring and like heart-wrenching story. And I hadn't really seen much of David Goggins stuff. I'd sort of seen a few like parodies about him. Apparently, you know, he apparently does talks while doing pull-ups and stuff. And I'd sort of seen a few parodies of that. But then I listened to the audiobook and I was like, this is actually so sick. And I was like so inspired by the story. And, you know, a big part of his message is that we can, you know, it sounds a bit cliche, but like we can set out to achieve anything if we want it enough, if our mind, you know, suitably embraces discomfort and embraces the pain. And the more we push through the pain, the more we embrace it, the more we love it, the more likely we are to succeed at whatever we want to do. And I don't quite agree with the entire message, which is that like, hey, suffer now and live your life as a champion kind of stuff. But because I'm less about that suffering narrative personally, and I'm kind of soft. So like, you know, I don't really like going for runs when it's cold or going for runs at all. But it was just like a really inspiring read. And again, everyone I've recommended this to has read it and been like, okay, this is actually really sick. So yeah, check it out. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Next, we have the book Educated by Tara Westover. This is really interesting. It's non-fiction, but it's a memoir and it's not really like a self-help book. Like you don't like learn any actionable takeaways from it, but it's still really interesting. It's like the story of this girl called Tara who grew up in a Mormon family in like Utah, I think, where they're living on this mountain, and the family are preparing for the end of days because they think in like the year 2012 or something the world is going to end, and so they're like preparing for that. And you know, she doesn't have a birth certificate, she doesn't go to school, she like, you know, the father doesn't believe in hospitals, and so the family gets ill and no one ever goes to a hospital because they think hospitals are evil. And as she grows older, like her father becomes really radical, her brother becomes like really violent, and then it's like the story of how she ends up going to school and ends up going to university and just the struggles along the way. And again, like really heart-wrenching and rending in places, heartwarming in others. Really good book. Yeah. Great stuff. Then we have this book, How to Not Die Alone. I've already made a video about this, which will be linked up there and down in the video description, so you can check it out. This book has single-handedly transformed my love life and has changed the way that I approach dating and relationships and stuff. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I've done a whole video talking about it. It's like 15 minutes long, so you should totally check it out. Yeah, How to Not Die Alone. What a fantastic title. I've been recommending this to so many friends. Oh, and at number 10, we have The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. Again, I have done a video about this already, so I'll link that up here and down there. I won't talk about it much. It's a bit of a clickbaity title, I'll be honest. The Millionaire Fastlane. But genuinely, it's probably the best book I've ever read on how to kind of grow wealth and how to get rich by building a business. So he distinguishes between the slow lane and the fast lane. And the slow lane approach to wealth building is it's probably the thing that your parents will have told you. Go to college, get a good job, save up a lot of money, get a house, get on the property ladder, maybe put some money in stocks. And over time, when you're 65, then you'll be rich. That's the very slow lane approach to wealth building. Whereas what he talks about is the fast lane, which talks about how you can build a business that works for you rather than you necessarily working for the business, and how you can become quite rich quickly. And by quickly, he means like within 5 to 10 years rather than within 50 years. A really good book. I'll link my proper book club episode about it in the video description if you want to check it out. So those were 10 books that had an effect on my personal life. Let's talk about 5 books that had an impact on my business. And the main one for this year is Traction by Gino Wickman. Get a grip on your business. Me and the team stumbled across this about 6 months ago, and it's just completely changed the game for our business. So before, I feel like I didn't really know anything about running a business, and I was kind of making shit up as I went along, and it was quite chaotic. And at one point we had like 4 of us. Maybe this time last year there were 3.5 members of the team, and everything worked all right because we know it was all a bit chaotic, but there was only like 3 of us, and like Elizabeth was working part-time. So like stuff was getting done because we were small enough that we could make things happen. Then we started hiring some more people, and then very quickly found that we actually didn't have a way of running, like just didn't know how to run a business. And then I came across this book because a few friends recommended it, and it just like immediately, everything that I was reading and listening to in the book, it's like, the guy who wrote it could read my mind, and everything he was saying, he was like, you're probably having this problem in your business where blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh my God, Gino, you're right. How did you know? And it lays out a very practical, systematic, step-by-step way of running a business in terms of these 6 key structures. And to be honest, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I'd never have imagined that I'd be the sort of person who would read a business book, which is all about structuring your business. And we're also working with one of their official coaches who charges like £2,000, like $2,500 per day for like a day of coaching, but it's really, really, really good. And he has like a money back guarantee that he's like, look, if you ever feel that this is not valuable, you just don't have to pay me. But we've obviously, it's just gotten so much value out of the system, out of the book, out of the coaches. So I'm very, very, very bullish on this. And this is the book that I now recommend to anyone I know who has a business that has more than like three employees or 3 team members, because I think this will transform the way that you think about it. The only problem with Traction is that it's a very like rigid hierarchical way of running a business, which is totally fine because it works. But there is another book, and that's the next one on the list, called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work by these guys called Jason and David, who run a company in the US called Basecamp, which is like this project management software. Now, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work is much more kind of the way that I would want to run a business, which is about, basically the whole thing is that, look, your business is not your life. All of this thing about like hustling and like, working on like stupid hours, like it's all just BS. You can do a lot of good work for 40 hours a week. You don't have to put in 80 hours a week just to, make the shareholders happy. You don't have to try and get investment. You don't have to have meetings all the time. You don't have to be busy all around the clock. You can build a business that's a bit more calm, that doesn't have to be crazy. And I really vibe with this because the way that I want to build my business is less about like, metrics and targets and KPIs, and we've got to grow every year, and more like, hey, this is all about building a cool lifestyle. This is about helping people while being profitable, while having fun. Let's not like go overboard on the whole like metricization of life, where admittedly Traction is very like pro metrics, like everyone should have a number, everyone should be tracked. How you hire and fire people is based on whether they hit the numbers. I think that has its place, but there's like a really nice kind of vibe, which is a bit more calm, and I kind of prefer the vibe of It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. So we're trying to do some kind of middle ground these days between like a hierarchical, systematic approach, which is helpful for things like accountability and clarity for team members, but also trying to bear in mind that, just a job at the end of the day, like it's not anyone's life except mine, and it shouldn't be anyone's life, maybe except mine. And that's, we should just be a bit more chill about the whole thing. Next, we have a great title, The Great CEO Within, The Tactical Guide to Company Building. This broadly seems to be aimed at like tech CEOs, but there was a bunch of stuff in this that was genuinely really helpful in terms of like what a CEO should do with their time and how they should manage their calendar and how they should think about firing and building a team and building a culture, and a bunch of stuff that I just never knew before I read this. It talks about decision making and transparency and like how to be a good leader, and I need to reread/listen to this multiple times because there's just so much really good stuff in it, and it's such a small book and very, very readable. So this will be next on my re-listening list. Next, we have this book, The New 1 Minute Manager, which is a really, really tiny book all about how to be a manager. Basically boils it down to 3 things: 1 minute goals, 1 minute praisings, and 1 minute redirects. And I knew nothing about how to be a manager before I read this and a couple of other books, and now I'm like, oh, okay, this manager thing isn't so bad. I'm still learning, I still suck at it, like to be honest, and I'm trying to do less of it as the business grows so I can focus on the content so that other team members like Angus can focus on like the team management each side of things. But yeah, new 1 Minute Manager, probably, yeah, completely game changing in terms of like how short it was to read and how much value it had on helping me develop as a manager. And finally, we have another leadership book. Love it. The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, a Leadership Fable by Pat Lencioni. And if you told me a few years ago I'd be reading a book called The 4 Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, I'd be thinking, what the hell are you on? Like, why the hell would I ever read a book called that? That just sounds like dry and boring as hell. But genuinely, it's really good. Again, it's very short. Like these business books, they tend to be quite short and they tend to speak in stories. And it basically talks about how to be a really good team leader. There's basically only 4 things you have to do. And most of them are around just like giving people clarity of what's expected of them and over communicating that over and over and over again. And one of the main challenges and learnings I've had growing this business over the last year is the fact that really so many problems stem from a lack of clarity and a lack of communication. And I thought I knew this. I was like, oh yeah, communication's important. Everyone says that. And then you hire people and you have a team and you're like, damn, no one told me how important this communication stuff was and how like it's really important to just over communicate all of the things. And the more you over communicate all of the things, like where the business is going and what the values are and all that jazz, the more things start to align. And so, you know, for the last 6 months, I feel like I've been sort of all over the place with running this business. But now that I've read all this stuff, now that we've started to apply it, now that we have the right team around us, I feel like my personal life is much more chill and much more happy because everything in the business is kind of streamlined and moving in the same direction. So yeah, 4 Obsessions, Extraordinary Executive, definitely recommend if you are a leader or a manager of any kind. All right, so if you've gotten to this bit of the video, then you're probably the sort of person that actually enjoys stretching themselves mentally, learning new skills, trying out new things. And so you should definitely check out Brilliant, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Brilliant is a fantastic online platform with courses in maths, science, and computer science. And the courses are genuinely some of the best I've ever taken on those topics. And they teach you the topic in a very first principles, interactive kind of way, rather than the way that we get taught in school, which is very like didactic and like being told to do certain things. Brilliant doesn't do any of that. It's like genuinely really fun. And what they do is they teach you a little bit and they build on top of it and then they ask you questions about it. So you genuinely feel as if you are learning as you're going along. And this is the same model that's used in universities like Oxford and Cambridge via their tutorial and supervision system. You kind of learn a little bit, you build on it, you ask questions, and it feels really fun and engaging and interactive. Some of my favorite courses on Brilliant are the computer science ones. As some of you guys know, when I was applying to med school, I was actually thinking of applying to computer science instead because I was always super into computers and coding and stuff. And I ended up going for med school in the end, but I always kind of thought, what if I did a degree in computer science? Or what if I actually knew stuff about algorithms and programming and things? And so through the courses on Brilliant, like, you know, the introduction to algorithms, the introduction to neural networks, the introduction to crypto, introduction to Python, I've gone through all these courses and I feel like my own knowledge of computer science has leveled up so much than it would have been had I not done these or just found random videos on YouTube instead. If that sounds up your street and you want to level up your skills in maths or science or computer science, or maybe even all 3, then head over to brilliant.org/Ali, and the first 200 people to hit that link, which is also in the video description, will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. So thank you very much, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video. Now, as I was going through my list of books for this year, I realized I actually did not read a lot of fiction this year. Normally I read a ton of fiction, but because I wasn't commuting anywhere because we were in lockdown for most of the year, I didn't listen to any fiction audiobooks, except I did re-listen to the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of my favorite series of all time. 100% recommended to everyone on the fiction front. Starts with the book The Final Empire. It looks really thick. It is kind of thick, but I'd recommend it as an audiobook. It's absolutely sick. And I also finished listening to Rhythm of War, which is the 4th book of the Stormlight Archive series that starts with The Way of Kings, again by Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author of all time. So if you haven't checked him out, and if you're interested in maybe dabbling in fiction, check out Mistborn. It's like, you know, Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's like that, but on steroids. It's absolutely sick. I might even do a third re-listening to it because it's just so good. And then I'm going to do a reread of the Stormlight Archive as well. I know there's all these other books out there, but these ones are just so sick that I just absolutely love them. Anyway, that's a wrap up of my annual review of my 15 plus 2 favorite books that I read in 2021. If you want to check out some of my more videos about how I read so many books, I usually read somewhere between about 80 and 120 per year. There's a little playlist over here that has all my top tips on how to read more books if you're into that kind of stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.